So tonight, our roundtable is about Leave No Trace on high adventure treks. Michelle Bierstedt and Aaron Collins will be presenting to us. By the way, I am not Andrea Watson, if you haven't noticed. My name is Matt Durant. I'm sitting in for Paul Shimke tonight. He is busy this evening and traveling and isn't able to present, but we're grateful for his efforts for putting together this wonderful slideshow, and we will proceed on. Okay. So our agenda for tonight, after we're done with this little opening bit, we'll have our safety moment about PFDs. I always get that mixed up with PDFs, but if there's anything safe you need to know about PDFs, I'm sure we can find that somewhere as well. Then we'll go into our main presentation and have our conservation corner with the conservation side of the house of the committee. Then we'll have some FAQs about the World Conservation Award with Scott Anderson, our national chair. And then we'll have a few announcements and our closing. And after we're done, as always, we can have some open discussion. If there's any remaining questions, we will answer those at that time. Also, please, if you can't ever see anything or hear anything, please let me know so that we can fix any audio or video issues that we may have along the way. And as always, as you come in and as you're participating in this, please make sure that your microphones are turned off, that you're muted. That way we don't have any interesting background noise as the presentation proceeds. All right, we'll go ahead and start with the pledge. Please follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two. And please follow me in the Scout Oath. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, and to obey the Scout Law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. And the Scout Law: a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And then the Outdoor Code: as an American, I will do my best to be clean in my outdoor manners, be careful with fire, be considerate in the outdoors, and be conservation minded. All right, thank you. We'll turn it over to Michelle now for our safety moment about personal flotation devices.
And only if I unmute. Because we're going to be talking about our river trek, I thought it would be a good time to review PFDs and PFD safety. So obviously the one here on the picture has a few issues because we certainly don't want to load it down with a bunch of stuff. Next slide. So just like many other things, there actually is a safety moment link on the scouting.org website, life jackets and personal flotation devices. So a common misconception in the water is that the jackets and other type of personal flotation devices are only necessary for non-swimmers. That's not true. We want to make sure that we are using approved life jackets and PFDs all the time. And it can mean the difference between having fun on the water and having it be your last time on the water. And as a scout leader, certainly we don't want to be making that phone call. So make sure that you are following the Guide to Safe Scouting and Safety Afloat as your basic general guidelines in scouting for all boating activities, whether it's a paddleboard, a canoe, a kayak, a rowboat, a paddle boat, any of those things. Make sure that we are looking at our PFDs. And specifically, make sure we check them. A lot of us are working at a scout camp and we go, oh, they're only used a couple weeks or maybe a month in a year, so they're all fine. But they're not all fine. They still need to be inspected every year. We need to make sure that they're in good working order, that there aren't any problems with them. So what types of PFDs are there? You have your type 1 through type 5. So the type 5 are the special use devices. And again, on the inside of the PFD, it'll tell you what type it is and for what kinds of activities it would be used for. So certainly you have the offshore life jackets, the nearshore life jackets. We all know those right now because those are the ones that are simple and cheap. We have the flotation aids for inland use, the throwable device, which we would not be using except like in a rowboat type scenario, very close to shore. But our scouts especially should be in PFDs whenever they're doing those boating activities. So how to check your PFD for safety? One of the things that we started doing at camp is because we have changeover as far as who's going to be in charge of the waterfront or who's doing the track or whatever, is when we do an inspection, we actually put the year that it was inspected with an I. So I means inspected, N means new, and then that year. And that gets put on the PFD, and that way we know when it was inspected last and when it was purchased so that we can keep track of the condition of those PFDs. Make sure none of the PFDs are altered in any way. And obviously we want to make sure that they fit properly. So doing that fit checks are always important as well. Don't put heavy objects on your PFD or use it as a kneeling pad or a boat fender or your chair on the beach or any of those types of things because PFDs lose buoyancy when crushed. Make sure they're dry before putting it away. That especially at the end of the summer, there's nothing worse than opening up a container and having mold and mildew all through your PFDs. Make sure they're stored in a well-ventilated place if you're storing it throughout the summer. Don't leave your PFDs in the canoes for long periods of time. They get rained on, they get baked in the sun. That's not helpful for them either. And never dry a PFD on a radiator heater or another direct heat source. One way to check it, if you can squish your PFD with between your two fingers, if it bounces back, that's great. If it makes a crunching sound, it's time for it to hit the dumpster. Or if it doesn't come back at all, if it stays squished, then it has lost its buoyancy and it's time for it to be replaced. Also check for rips, tears, holes. Make sure the fabric straps aren't fraying. Make sure the hardware is okay so that we don't have broken clips or anything like that. No signs of waterlogging. It shouldn't smell mildewy or have mold growing on it. And check it at the start of each season. Your PFDs need to be in good shape before you get on the boat. Okay. With that, that's your safety moment for today.
All right. And thank you, Michelle. You're not done yet because Michelle is one of our presenters tonight, Michelle and Aaron Collins from the Sioux Council in South Dakota. So we will let you continue on.
All right. This is the 20th anniversary of our Missouri River High Adventure Base trek. And one of the reasons for doing that, it's gone through several iterations. But I'll tell you, when this trek first started, they used to take big, huge Dutch ovens and large amounts of charcoal, and they built big fires out on the islands. And they really didn't care about the size or any of that. And really, the National Park didn't either. And the National Park Service is now in charge of this section of the Missouri River. We call it the 59-mile section. It is as natural as it can be given the towns and stuff that are on it. So it's actually considered the Missouri River, the Missouri National River Basin. And so there's a 39-mile section north of our reservoir and a 59-mile section south of the reservoir. And so for this particular trek, we use that southern part. The northern part tends to get a little bogged down in sand from the Niobrara River. And so it can during some seasons, it can be pretty hard to canoe. The lower section of the river is controlled by the dam. And so they control both the speed and the amount of water that's being released at any time. So it's a little more predictable for the canoes. So that's why we chose that particular section. But it is as close to the river would have been when Lewis and Clark ran up the river as we can get with some towns inside. So with that, I'll let you change slides, Matt. So like I said, this is the 20th anniversary on the river. And after COVID, we knew we needed to we had two things happen. One, we had a huge 100-year flood come through and it wiped out a huge number of our sand islands. And it also changed the riverbanks quite a bit. And then COVID hit. And so we had two socket to us type events that occurred. And so it made it a great time to change the purpose and the language of the trek. And so that's what we've now spent the last couple of years doing, to get us much more leave no trace, much more in line with what the National Park Service would like, much more in line with our current outdoor code. And so we spent a lot of time looking at program. And so whether you're planning your own trek or whether you work with a council on a high adventure base, we're just here to give you some ideas of what are some things that you can do to make sure that the outdoor code and leave no trace principles, the skills that they have been learning, can now be put into practice. Next slide. There's just a picture of it. So you can see it's lined. There's a lot of cottonwood. So during the riverboat days, the loggers would come in and they would cut cottonwood and they would stack it right on the edge of these sandbar islands. And the riverboat captains would stop and load up their riverboats with cottonwood. And that's what they would use for steam to go up the river. So a lot of the cottonwood stands were destroyed over time, and the National Park Service has spent something like $1.6 million in the last 10 years to get all of the landowners to replant in the cottonwoods. Next slide. So our basis for this was to use our River Corridors card. And all scouts that go on the trek receive one of the cards, and this is what they're trained on before they leave for trek. So they're supposed to have had some training in leave no trace before they come. And then we spend a couple hours going through it on the night that they arrive as we're going through safety and procedures. We also, once again, do a little workshop so they understand what it is to be on the river and how we're going to follow those principles. Next. Here I'm going to let Aaron take over because he's going to hit on what we have to do as far as risk management and those NCAP standards, since it is a high adventure base.
Good evening, everybody. So SQ 410 is it's your track director certification, and then your SP 218 is your pre-trek. What are you talking about pre-trek? What are you doing to get your group prepared for the trek? Part of that trek is making sure you have any licenses or any approvals from the national state parks. If you're landing in an area like we are with this trek, we need approval from Ponca State Park to arrive at their trek or at their location when we finish our trek. And a lot of the standards, SP 219, 220, and 221, they cover how you're preparing your food, what you're going down the trek, how you're communicating with your constituents. One thing that really worked for us pre-trek before the arrival, we have a Google Classroom that shows the participants a breakdown what the trek looks like on Google Earth. It kind of breaks down, which you'll see later. It breaks down where they're stopping, where the bathrooms are, if there's an emergency, where you can pull off. Just breaking down everything that they need to know beforehand. During the trek, we've got two-way radios so that if we have the Garmin minis that we can communicate with the trek leader, and then we can also communicate with the other treks that are on the water. They tell you everything from weather, location. You can text back and forth on them. They're very handy. They're a little pricey, but they are definitely worth it. I would say for the two of them, I believe it was $750, and it's an annual license of $59. But once your trek is over, you can turn them off, and then you can just renew it the next year for the $59. And then it goes just like that. Those are that, and then RP 460 -1, I believe, is the conservation project. I didn't get that pulled up, but it's working with the conservation, doing a conservation project and making sure that you're following the leave no trace principles. Michelle, back to you.
Okay. So with all good risk map, oh, can you go back just one bit there, Matt? So one of the ways that we needed to identify those risks on the water, weather is a big one. We are in the upper Midwest, which means a storm can come up just about any time. So we do keep a monitor. One of the things that we found, it used to be that the truck director went on track. And looking at our identified risks, our camp made the decision that did not make sense. So we have trek guides that go on the river with the trek. The trek director stays back at base camp and runs all of the risk assessments each or several times a day, especially when it comes to weather. We did have an injury where somebody had to be pulled off the water last year. So that was Aaron and I got to go down and I took care of the crew while he took the leader to the emergency room. So what we found is that in order to really mitigate those risks and be sure that there is someone available to keep the trek on track and be able to handle all that the trek director actually stays back at base camp and monitors those identifiable risks while the trek guides go down the river with the group. We talk about water levels. We are controlled by a dam. And so we have to make sure that the water levels are within certain numbers. If there is a lot of rain upstream and the Army Corps of Engineers releases too much water, we have to pull the boats off because it becomes unsafe. Same thing the other way. If they were in a drought situation and they turn the water way down and it becomes too shallow, because off of our sandbars, a lot of times there's a deep hole. We have to be careful and make sure that we know where those obstacles are, where the identifiable holes are in the river. The Missouri River can run anywhere from a couple feet deep to about 80 feet deep. And so we don't want anybody getting stuck in any of that back tides. Drinking water and supplies. Unfortunately, the Missouri River is no longer usable even with a filtered water. So the National Park Service, as part of their permitting process, has asked that we do not let the scouts filter and drink water, but instead have a water drop each day. As well as pull supplies off so that there's no chance of trash being left behind. So the trek director again meets with those people each day, or meets at a location each day, checks and does those supply drops. And then Aaron talked about our communication with the group, both before arrival and then during the trek with our radios and our pre-trek communications. Next slide. The water isn't safe because the amount of nitrates in it from the fertilizers. It's agriculture all the way from top to bottom to this point, and we have such a high count of nitrates and fertilizers in the water that they don't recommend even with filtering. So cooperation with land managers, this became extremely important as we redid the trek. The National Park Service took over several of the islands and are now in control of places like Goat Island, which is our biggest island on the river in that 59-mile stretch. But many of the smaller sandbar islands are owned by private landowners. So we've had to work with the private landowners as far as which ones we can stop at, which ones they're okay with us walking on. Or portaging around. We have one that we work with that actually lets us camp on it. And there are no services on there. So it is totally primitive. And we have to be careful because he doesn't want other people camping on it. So we camp on the backside, all the boats pulled up so that people don't realize we're actually there. Also, islands are vulnerable to erosion due to flooding. And so we have to be really careful about where we put the boats. At night, we bring them way up on shore. And again, we have to avoid things like the small cottonwood trees and the nesting plovers that are nesting during the time of our treks. The National Park Service now has a permit process for being on track in the park. And so we have to fill that out yearly, and they have to approve it. And we have to show proof of insurance and tell them the exact locations that we're meeting with. And then because our conservation project is with the National Park Service, we actually meet them at one of our stops, and then they go out with the group. For the Conservation Service, Goat Island, like I said, was just purchased or was just taken over by the National Park Service. And right now people just kind of stomp all over it. So they are working on putting trails on it. They're doing several campsites and also putting in some fire rings so that the fire mitigation issues are dealt with. So for our conservation service, we're working with them on trail building, campsite building, sandbar cleanup, and then the plover nest count are some of the things that they've had us do in the last year or so. And then we have our 2 state parks that we work with, the Lewis and Clark Recreational Area on the South Dakota side and Ponca State Park on the Nebraska side. Next slide. And then there's the trek. So in total, it's actually 63 miles because we launched from our camp. So they do part of the reservoir. And it will go from the beach at camp all the way down to Ponca State Park with portage stops at Midway Beach. And then they enter back below the dam. So the Midway Beach is on the South Dakota side and part of the Lewis and Clark Recreation Area, which is a state park. We portage them around the dam and put them back in just below the dam. Even though we are more urban based because of the cities of Yankton and Vermilion and Ponca, we are still using leave no trace backcountry camping skills since we're staying on the primitive islands. And then our conservation service project on Goat Island with the National Park Service, and then ending at Ponca State Park, which has horseback riding and a big shooting sports complex. They have fishing, hiking. You can go paddle boarding. So it's a great cooperative that we end there with Ponca. Next. This is from the reservoir, so you can see it is actually fairly wide. But before the camp, again, we talked about communication. And so we have a Google Earth show. And if Matt can pull that up.
Yep, just a second.
Yeah.
Yep.
There we go. And then if you hit run show, Matt, if you can. So there you'll see the different colors. So the yellow is where we are actually stopping for something. The little binoculars on there say that that's just a rest stop or a wildlife viewing or a quick out to stretch your legs. It does get tiring to sit in a canoe for hours on end. So those are some of the highlight points. The spots with the little red heart is your emergency pullouts. So if there's an injury, if the weather gets bad, if someone isn't feeling well, we have had cases of kids starting to get dehydrated or even have a little bit of heat exhaustion. So then we can pull out at those emergency spaces and we can get the trailers into those emergency spaces if we have to pull the boats out for something. So we start up at Lewis and Clark, and I love the Google Earth way because it gives the participants a chance to see what the terrain is. So you can see our Lewis and Clark camp. We have some cliffs. We have a 352-foot height elevation change within our camp from the bottom camp to the top camp. And so they're going to launch right off at the water's edge there. Paddle down the 3.5 miles or so down to Midway Beach. And then we portage them around the dam. And you should be able to hit the next part, Matt, on the slideshow. There we go. They can get in nice and close. And see, so this is a public beach. So again, that respectful of visitors, there's often times where there's a lot of people on the beach. So they find a spot where there's not a lot of people that particular day. And then we can pick them. They have to load the canoes on and portage around the dam. Okay, next part. The Gavins Point Dam is the dam. It used to be open. We used to be able to take tours and go look at the hydroelectric dam part, or the hydroelectric plant. COVID kind of killed that. But now we can look at the dam. They can watch the water go through it, and we can talk about it. Next. The Chief White Crane boat launch, again, is kind of your last stop for the night of this is in the town of Yankton. And then they're going to head out to a privately owned island called Rush Island. So the next one. Oh, sorry. Green Island is just a stop to take a look at wildlife. It's a recreation area. The bridge is kind of interesting because it was built by Japanese POWs. There was a POW camp in Yankton during the war. So here we are coming into Rush Island. You can see it's sandbar on the upriver side. And as we go down, Matt, if you hit it one more time. So where they camp is right where the tree line is. So they come off of, so there's my little tent. So that tells the group that that's our campsite for the night. And then they can come into there, and then they camp right on the edge of the sand and the cottonwood forest. Because of the plovers, we stay off of the sand itself. Okay, keep zipping through, Matt. You're good. Again, we have an emergency location, so if the weather were to kick up, we would be able to get to them if we needed to. Next. Myron Grove boat ramp is their first refueling stop, so to speak. So we'll change out water jugs then, take any trash, and this is also where they meet the National Park Service to head out to Goat Island. Next. So this is Goat Island. So where the scouts have been working mainly is in the little area right by where the tent area is. That sandbar there is where they launch. There's actually a flagpole on there for whatever reason. And you can start seeing some of the trails that they plan on putting in. It really doesn't have a lot of elevation, but Goat Island has its name because the farmer that was across his way, even though he didn't actually own it, he would ferry the goats out there each morning. They would run around the island, and then he would ferry them back the next day. And so they would be on and off the island all the time. Right now, there are no established campsites or fire rings. That is changing as soon as although the funding comes in. And then last year, they also did a bunch of beach cleanup. Right off the screen where we can't see, there's actually a shipwreck. So the scouts can actually, after they're done with their service project, once they have their camp set up, they can take the canoes back out and go all the way around the island, and they can visit the boat wreck. Next. Again, that's an emergency pull-off, my little heart. And with our radios, they can actually pull this map if they need to. Mulberry Bend is a place where they can do a little hiking. There's a state wildlife park there. It's also a great lunch stop. If you want to use an actual restroom, they have a restroom there area. Next. That's the overlook, so they can hike from the beach all the way up and then look over the valley. Next. The Bolton boat ramp, the National Park Service actually lets us camp here. And some of those pictures that you saw with the canoes on the beach side a little bit earlier were from this area. You'll notice that it's not very big. There's some trees. There is nothing out there. It's not even a regular boat ramp. It's just for canoes, kayaks, and paddleboards. So we're allowed to camp on it, and they can camp either along the shoreline or right along the edge there. Next. And our last stop, they end at Ponca. And Ponca is a huge state park. It's one of Nebraska's biggest state parks. And again, has a lot of amenities. So that's where they get to take a shower. They can go to the swimming pool. They can go horseback riding, shooting sports, all of that kind of stuff. So it's a great way to end a trek. It's kind of that fun piece that ends it. Okay. So if you run a trek and you haven't thought about using a Google Earth, it really is a good way. I use it to train even our guides so they know what the prescribed pullouts are. If a storm were to come up suddenly and they couldn't get to one of those, we can be on the islands. It's just hard to get out of the way, and you have to be careful along the shoreline to make sure you don't run into any cattle or run into landowners that don't want you there. So you got to watch those no trespassing ones. Okay, so that's the Google Earth that we put together to help us with our trek, and again helps us identify some of those risks. We'll let Matt get back to the slide.
About it.
Yep.
There we go. There we go. Is that where you need to be?
Yep.
Okay.
So this is an aerial view of Goat Island on the top part, and then on the bottom you can see as those scouts are leaving that Myron Grove boat ramp, they're only about a mile from the edge of Goat Island, and they go around on the Nebraska side, so on the far side. And again, they're going to meet the National Park Service. They bring out their motorboat. They go quickly. We have our canoes, but they'll depends on who comes out. Sometimes they'll meet them at the boat ramp and they'll kind of go over some of the safety, what the plan of the day is, what they hope to accomplish before going out. Sometimes they just meet us right on the island, and then they'll talk to them about their and again, depending on the weather and where they're at and what the plover nest is, one group had to camp in the trees, one group got to camp out on the sandbar and do some night viewing. So it's up to the NPS guys who are out there that day to let them know where they can set up camp for that night until they get the campsites established. Next. So some of the wildlife we hit on, these are the little plovers. They're endangered. So they've been on the Endangered Species Act since 1985, and it serves as critical breeding habitat. So for a long time, we had very low numbers of the piping plovers. Last year, they said we had record numbers of nests out on the sandbars. And so it was, I think, a lot of fun for some of the scouts to get a chance to see them. They're just teeny tiny little birds. They kind of make a little sand nest and drop 2-3 little speckled eggs. So, with increased human traffic and people out there wanting to recreate, the plovers have had a kind of a hard time. And I think they've had some recovery, especially since COVID and stuff. They've been able to recover and more designated areas for them to be. And then the pallid sturgeon is kind of the river's big claim to fame. It's a monstrosity of a fish. Our fish hatchery right outside at the Lewis and Clark Recreational Area, the state park, we also have a national fish hatchery. They actually will hatch some of the pallid sturgeon and release them in. And so they're a neat looking fish if you like sort of that prehistoric look. So next. So this is that Bolton boat ramp that I talked about where we can camp right on the edge. So if we have more than one group go out or more than one crew go out, they will spread themselves out. So this group chose to be on the short grasses. Another group was in another set of the short grasses. And then our third group that week was along the river's edge in the short grasses, but off the sand. And then the sandy areas, we stay away from the water. And then we use the maintained beaches, the public beaches for any portages that we have to take. We use group campsites at the state park, and we try to keep those smaller groups even on the river. So try to break those groups up so we're only a couple boats at each time. We do send one guy on a larger group. We send one guide boat in front and one guide boat stays in the back. So that we can make sure that everybody is in between. We're not losing anybody. And then we have those daily water and trash pickups. Next slide. again, because of the regulations with National Park Service, there are no open fires anymore. So, and we no longer take charcoal in big Dutch ovens or anything like that. That would require trying to make any sort of even a contained fire. So cat holes on the islands, and they dig them just like regular cat holes. So we do have to make sure that everybody understands what that means before they go out. And the other option is that your group decides that you're going to stop at those city, state parks, boat ramps before you get to your campsite, and then use any facilities there, ditch any trash, et cetera, et cetera. We practice a no crumb cooking. So if you spill it, you clean it up. So if you spill spaghetti on the sand, the spaghetti has that little spoonful of sand has to go in the trash along with your spilled spaghetti. All trash is carried out and given to camp staff. Restrooms and restrooms are available along the ways. Showers are at Ponca State Park. And we use small stove cooking, whether it's a camp stove or a 2-burner Coleman stove, and then no campfires at all. So they have to practice alternate campfires in the evening for that. Next. There's a portage off of that lovely beach. So Aaron, anything you want to add about the truck?
I can comfortably say last year we learned the limitations of the trek. 34 people was probably too many people. So know your limits, know how many people your group is comfortable with, and just have that open, constant communication while you're on the trek to make sure that if there's an injury or an incident, what is the easiest way to get them off of the trek and to safety. So that is all.
There are a couple questions here that you guys might be able to answer. One from Gary Custis, who says, are there commercial trips using the same section of the river, and are there high traffic times?
There are not any commercial trips that use the river. We do have a couple of canoe and kayak clubs that will often kind of join us for part of the trip or wave hi to us when we're going down. But there are not commercial treks, mostly because there's not a lot of stopping points along the way. We do have a group that does through Missouri River, so they'll start way up in Montana and they go all the way through down to St. Louis. And there are some groups that do that, but otherwise there are no commercial treks.
All right, and then there's a couple of questions regarding the cat holes.
Okay.
Why cat holes and not wag bags? Does the sand have a dark bacteria level that will permit breakdown? And then another one, are cat holes above flood level?
Right. So the cat holes, I asked that same question, and both the private landowners and the National Park Service were comfortable with cat holes versus wag bags. And on the islands, if you are on Goat Island, for example, yes, you're far enough in and stuff that it's only during one of these huge major floods that it would ever be an issue. And otherwise, I think they just figure, since there are so many cattle that use the river and stuff, and we're not using it for drinking in any way unless it's being done through a municipal drinking, that it wasn't going to make any difference. So both National Park Service and the landowners and the state parks were comfortable with us doing cat holes on the islands themselves. Okay. Just to give you an idea, we do run the trek 4 weeks in the summertime. We don't always fill up every trek, depending on schedules and stuff. Because again, we're talking about older scouts, so we all know what their schedules look like. But these are the weeks that we run it. It runs adjacent to our regular summer camp. So if we had a group coming in for summer camp and they have an older scout group, if they wanted to, the older scouts could go on the river trek, as long as they have the adult leadership for that. while the younger scouts stay at base camp. And if anybody was curious, we put down what the prices were, again, just to give you an idea of what we can do the trek for. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug because I have a level 2 instructor course happening at Lewis and Clark on June 3rd through 8th. Registration closes May 25th. So if you've been on the fence, ooh, do I want to come all the way to South Dakota? For our Midwest friends, it's not so bad. We're right off of I-90 and I-29, so it's pretty easy to get to. We have brand new buildings out there. We have our new health lodge and admin building. We have a new museum and education center. We have all of these big new camp pavilions. And how many camps have a quail reintroduction program? So we raise baby quail and then we release them at the end of the summer with our scouts to help control our tick populations. That was started by a scout 6 years ago, and we have continued with it. So if you would like a level 2 instructor course, but want a non-trek experience or have some special needs that maybe non-trek works for you, we have one.
All right, Michelle, are you finished or anything else you want to go over? Or?
Nope. Are there any other questions?
Well, let's take a look in the chat real quick. All right, that is a question we can answer later about training codes and whatnot. So we'll get to that afterwards. All right, well, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Aaron, for sharing that wonderful presentation about your high adventure trek on the river there. That looks absolutely fantastic, lots of fun. We'll go into our next section now. So this is the little video segment that I generally prepare each month about communicating Leave No Trace online. So we will just go ahead and go right into that. Here we go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our roundtable this evening. Tonight, I'd like to talk about an aspect of Leave No Trace that is becoming more and more important in the 21st century, the way we communicate with each other in the digital world. Just as the way we conduct ourselves in the outdoors can have long-lasting impacts on the environments we use, so does the way we conduct ourselves in the virtual world. The impacts made in the virtual world can have long-lasting environmental and emotional consequences, though. If you have taken a Leave No Trace course, you've probably had a great deal of discussion about how to address so-called less than Leave No Trace behavior using things like authority of the resource technique. But we've never really addressed how to have civil and educational discussions about these kinds of behaviors online. I recently completed the Effectively Communicating Leave No Trace course online at lnt.org, and I'd like to share a few important points from the digital communication portion of that course, starting with this quote. Social media is an incredibly powerful tool, and how we use it has the power to influence the behavior of others. Just as much as it can draw attention to impacts, it can also get eyes on sustainability information. If social media users are aware of the impact their posts can have, they can use their online presence for good. By modeling good environmental stewardship, it could inspire a new audience to practice ethical behavior. Because social media allows us to share information with a wide audience, stewardship-minded social posts could reach users that may traditionally be excluded from sustainability information. Here are a few key points taken directly from that course that I would like to share with you. The first one is be thoughtful about what images portray. And what the text in the course says, it says, give some thought to what your images may encourage others to do. Images demonstrating good Leave No Trace practices can help share a stewardship message. So, for example, what you're seeing right now is a photo that I see pop up on Instagram very, very often. It's a picture of some folks kayaking and paddleboarding out on some canals in the Bonneville Salt Flats west of Salt Lake City here. And it's really cool looking, it's really beautiful, looks very fun. A lot of times the caption with it is, how many of you would like to do this? But the problem is these canals are on private property and the blue color of the water is not a natural thing. This is industrial runoff from mining and from potash factories there on the Bonneville Salt Flats. And so that water is extremely toxic and shouldn't be paddled in or swam in or touched in any way, shape, or form. And this keeps coming up, and people will oftentimes correct that and say something about it. But we need to be thoughtful of what our images portray. Does it portray illegal activity or unsafe activity like this particular photo portrays? Or can we portray things that show and demonstrate good leave no trace practices? The next point is know what impact social media can have. Remember, you have an audience of billions of people online when you post something. And you can either influence billions of people to make better decisions, or you can influence those same billions to do things and participate in less than leave no trace behavior. The next one is when geotagging crowded, overrun, or delicate outdoor areas, include leave no trace as an educational tool for those reading your posts. So this is, again, utilizing that and knowing the impact that your social media posts can have. Now, there is a lot of debate and maybe gray area about this one. Well, what information do I give when I post something about a certain place? And it does say here, if you do geotag a place, make sure that you include leave no trace as an educational tool and give some information about that. Another approach to that is, well, perhaps for some places, maybe geotagging it wouldn't be the best option. Let's say it's a sensitive archaeological site that has not yet reached the epic proportions of popularity that some places have. Maybe being a little more vague about that would help preserve that place. But for places like, say, Yosemite, El Capitan or something like that, whether you geotag it or not, everybody's going to know what it is. So you might as well put a positive spin on it. Another one is consider a land acknowledgement. So educating yourself about the indigenous cultures that have inhabited this lands and the land where your photo is and have been displaced, and putting an acknowledgement on there. So think about doing that. And then the last one, and this is where I kind of want to spend most of the time, is avoiding negative language. When we teach and when we interact with people in the real world, in the outdoors, this is something that we're taught to do. We don't go up and tell someone, oh, your dog is off the leash, get it out of here, it's just messing things up. The whole education that we've had around authority of the resource is facing the issue together and approaching it in a friendly manner and in a way that creates a friend as opposed to creating an enemy. But all too often we hide behind the curtain of anonymity that we have online, and we forget this. And so I want to share an experience that I actually had just last week that demonstrates how hurtful this can be and maybe a way that you can address this. And it's from the point of view of, well, it's from my point of view, but me on the receiving end of some very hurtful words. 2 weeks ago, I took a trip to Bears Ears National Monument here in Utah. It's a spectacular landscape with amazing geology and even more amazing archaeological sites. As some of you know, I'm also a pretty serious amateur photographer, and I'm active on social media, including Instagram. As I always do, I chose to post some of what I thought were my best photos from the trip to Instagram. When I do this, I am careful to either not specifically name sensitive sites or give minimal information about sites that are already well known. I do this to help not create more horseshoe bends and false kivas in the world. But if a place is already quite well known, published, and frequently visited, I'll probably just state the name of the place, as it's not hard to find anyways. It would be like publishing a picture of Delicate Arch or Old Faithful and trying to keep it a secret. It's just not going to work. Well, I posted this picture that you're seeing of a well-known location in Bears Ears called the Citadel, which is found in every guidebook and website about the area. It's a beautiful and amazing and certainly deserves our care and protection. When I posted it, I simply stated that it was a picture of the Citadel. Next thing I knew, I had a comment from some unknown person telling me that I was part of the problem and that I should never post the names of places no matter how popular they were, and then #ethics. I was a little bit surprised by the comment that was both arrogant and hurtful, and I didn't know exactly how to respond. I thought about it for a while and wrote a reply where I said that I agreed that it was important to be respectful of these areas, and that for lesser known and more sensitive areas, it probably was a good idea to reveal less information, but that in my estimation, this was not such a place, as there are any number of very detailed web pages and YouTube videos online already that are not hard to find, that give very detailed information about how to get to the place and where it is and what it is. The area is not a secret, and it is promoted quite a bit even without my help. I got another biting reply telling me that I was obviously a novice and that I had no business going to these places and posting pics because I was so ignorant and careless. And you know, these words really stung. And you can imagine what might have gone through my head at this point. My first reaction was kind of, and I'm ashamed to admit, was to kind of maybe post some snarky reply with, well, do you really want to see how much of a novice I am? I've been teaching Leave No Trace for 20 years. What have you been doing besides being a jerk to people online you don't even know? And how about you attend one of the Leave No Trace courses I teach and we'll see who's the novice? Something stupid like that. Now, even though I really wasn't going to type out that reply that was going on in my head right there, I attempted several times to come up with something nicer, but still kind of one-up this guy. But then I stopped. I thought it through and I remembered the training I had just completed. Even though what this person had said was really hurtful to me and I really kind of did want to say something back to them, I remembered this training and I realized that exhibiting the same kind of behavior that he had exhibited is no way to educate and no way to encourage better behavior in the future. It just makes things worse. I remembered that sometimes it can be hard to follow the Scout law and be kind and courteous, especially to those that are not courteous and kind to you. So I ended up deleting what I was going to say, and in fact, I deleted the entire conversation and decided to just let it go. I did end up actually blocking the guy as he was pretty persistent, wouldn't leave me alone, and I really didn't want to be reminded of this over and over again. We have to be mindful that even in the digital world, we are still teachers and examples. In the woods, we may be interacting with a single person or maybe a handful of people at a time. But online, we have an audience of billions of people. And the way we choose to educate others about outdoor ethics or address less than Leave No Trace behavior can either be enlightening and uplifting, or it can come off as demeaning and hurtful and arrogant. And what we put out into the world is really a reflection of ourselves. So at the end, I would encourage you to take this effective communication course at lnt.org if you haven't done so already, and be mindful of not only the impacts that we can have on the land, but of the impacts that we can have on the hearts and minds of our fellow human beings for either good or bad. Because if we are hurtful to others when trying to teach the message of Leave No Trace, that message isn't going to have a place in their hearts. It's not going to have a place in their minds. All they're going to feel is the sting and the hurt of our words. And so we need to be very careful. We need to always teach in a positive way and find opportunities to uplift and to enlighten. Thanks for sharing this experience with me tonight. I hope you enjoyed it and you got something out of it, and we'll see you next week.
There we go. All right, we'll turn it over to Ted Weiland for our Conservation Corner.
So good evening from here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And sorry, I'm in the middle of cooking, so I apologize. I don't have a whole lot to report tonight, but I do want to mention that we have images, hopefully, and they're on the slideshow. And so I don't know if anybody can advance the slideshow, but we should have images of, there they are. These are the Distinguished Conservation Service Award medals. So these medals were designed by a gentleman named Joey Deerdorf. He has done a lot of designs for scouting And this was his first real foray into the designing for this particular committee. And so Joey, who has worked at Northern Tier and Philmont in the conservation department, felt a very close kinship to these particular awards and was honored to design them for us. So on the left, you see what will become the Youth Medal. So yes, we're going to get a medal for the Distinguished Conservation Service Award. We're hoping to, the order is going in hopefully at the end of this month. The timeline is not entirely down, but I am hoping by this fall that these will be available for order, if not sooner. So keep your eyes peeled. And then the image on the right is the Distinguished Conservationist Award. And so that is the national recognition for those who have given service at the regional, national, or international level for at least 20 years. So yeah, at this point, we're still getting the order in, but very exciting to see these final images. And hopefully we can use this to promote this fantastic opportunity. So the knot is already available. So at this point, anyone who has earned either the previous Hornaday medals, or the gold medal, or the silver or bronze medal, or the Distinguished Conservation Service Award, or Distinguished Conservationist, have already received a certificate and a knot. So these medals will then be available for those who have already earned those recognitions, and for those in the future who get these and earn these recognitions. So yeah,
and I'm going to jump in for a second, if I may. I physically had these prototypes in my hand yesterday, and they look terrific. They really do. And the order is going in the next 2 weeks. We have the money needed to make the initial batch, and we expect about a 6-week turnaround before it gets to national supply. So hopefully by August or September at the latest, they'll be available via national supply.
Oh, that's exciting. I am so jealous.
Oh, they look great. They really did.
And I think that's all I have from the Conservation Corner.
All right, thank you, Ted. I believe it is now time to turn it over to Scott for our FAQs.
Back to me. Next slide, please. So in addition to all of the questions about the National Medal of Outdoor Achievement, which I had answered over the last couple of roundtables, I've been getting a lot of questions about why did the BSA retire the Cub Scout World Conservation Award? And I just want to tell you a little bit of the history before we go into it. The Cub Scout program back in 2012 went under a rewrite, and a new program was introduced in 2015. And after that, they went through the feedback cycle. And during that feedback, the National Cub Scout Committee received all kinds of feedback and unhappiness with the program as it was being delivered. So what they did is they made the decision that they would completely reimagine the Cub Scout program. Next slide. And in doing so, they surveyed over 24,000 individuals. So they did this through Voice of the Scout surveys, as well as direct surveys that were sent to every den leader and every Cub Pack leader. And they received an enormous response rate. And because of that, they came up with some 3 main objectives. Next slide. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to change that program into something that was going to be fun. So fun for Cub Scouts, fun for leaders, and also fun for the parents. They wanted to make it easy to deliver the program as it's designed. Because that was one of the big issues of the last Cub Scout revision, is that it was a bit complex. And they wanted to make it simple to understand, simple to explain, and simple to support via the training materials, the direct association with our packs and our dens, and with our den leaders delivering the program to the scouts. So fun, easy, and simple. Next slide. So they determined that there were 4 areas of improvement that were needed. One was the Bobcat Award, the adventures themselves, the Webelos program, and the awards. And the awards is where we come in because we were one of those extra awards in scouting. And next slide. So what they did is they reached out at that point to a whole variety of subject matter experts. So subject matter experts for each of the adventures. They reached out to all of the Outdoor Programs and Properties Committee. They reached out to us, the Outdoor Ethics and Conservation Committee. They informed us of their intent to get rid of the World Cub Scout Award, the World Conservation Award. And I just got blinded here. I'm going to fix my light. Try that. Sorry, thank you. And laid out a brand new program based upon the recommendations from the variety of SMEs throughout the national committees. And essentially what they did here is they took Bobcat away, and Bobcat is now the first adventure of every rank. And that's because it's an entry award, but it also is a chance to refresh the Cub Scouts on the Scout Oath and the Scout Law and their purpose for being there. And then they divided Webelos into Webelos and Arrow Light. So two separate ranks now. And they did a consistent row of 6 required adventures for each one. So it's all the same. Every rank you go to, you had 6 required adventures. The first is the Bobcat. And then there were 2 elective adventures that were required to earn the rank. Next slide. So the awards themselves were retired. So this is the Cub Scout STEM Award, the World Conservation Award. It was believed that they were not in the direct line of sight of the den leaders, so they were frequently not earned. The average attachment rate was 1.5%. So 1.5% of our Cub Scouts were actually earning that award. That being said, we viewed it as one of our most popular outreaches. You know, we had interest in that award. And I will tell you that we fought hard with them to try to preserve that award, but we were not successful. We can't win them all. And they also felt that the awards don't drive behavior. So what they did, and if you'll step on the next slide, is they transitioned those awards directly into the adventures. Sometimes in a required adventure, other times they were elective adventures. And the elective adventures have an attachment rate between 15 to 25%. So now what we're hoping for is the replacement for that World Conservation Award is going to have at least 15% of Cub Scouts earning that elective award. So ultimately, it's a win-win. We're going to end up with much better attention to our program than we had through the old World Conservation Award. Next slide. So what they did is they took a look at Champions for Nature Challenge, which is part of the Earth Tribe program of the World Organization of the Scouting Movement. And they modeled some of those requirements in their adventures and developed an adventure that is an elective in all ranks called Champions for Nature. Next slide. So here, and sorry about the scroll, I work in a different program and doesn't always translate well. You see each of the ranks, and we can see that there is a Champions for Nature adventure for each rank involved. Now, you know, a lot of the requirements are similar. One example would be the last one of each rank is they participate in a conservation service project. They deal in the beginning with recycling and reduce, reuse, recycle. They deal a little bit more about soil and air pollution and other pollutions when they get to bear. And then by the time they get to Webelos and Arrow Light, they're exploring some more complex concepts. So ultimately, I think we have a great shot of reaching far more Cub Scouts in the program with this Champions for Nature elective adventure than we ever had with the Cub Scout World Conservation Award. So I am very pleased that this is moving forward. The handbooks have now all been released, and I believe the adult leader materials are now available also on the Scout stuff. the national supply. And I will try to share these slides in a different format so you can actually read the requirements at home at your leisure rather than go through them. But you can also go back to the recording at the end. Next slide. So, no plans to retire the World Conservation Award for Scouts BSA or for venturing at this time. So just know that that's not being discussed anywhere. I met with the chair of the Scouts BSA committee, and I met with the chair of the venturing committee, and that did not come up in the conversation. So I think for the time being, those awards still remain solid. Next slide. So then I did want to bring back up the sore wound that we have when we lost the Outdoor Ethics Awareness Award. And way back when they took the feedback of the 2015 revision of the Cub Scout program, we were told that they might consider letting us revitalize that award. And we know now that with the method that they chose, with getting rid of the awards, that will not happen. So for as long as this new Cub Scouting program is in place, that Outdoor Ethics Awareness Award for Cub Scouts is forever retired. Next slide. So what does happen to outdoor ethics in the Cub Scout program? There's been a couple of changes, but overall it remained intact. There is nothing in the Lion program, and that is, our kindergartners. It's a pretty basic program. And there are some tie-ins there because they talk about the buddy system and, knowing where you're going to go. But there is no direct outdoor ethic requirements. There are, however, in the required adventure, Tigers in the Wild for tigers, Paws on the Path for wolf, Bear Habitat for bear, the Weeblos Walkabout, and Outdoor Adventurer for Hour of Light. All of those are required adventures, and they have outdoor ethic requirements. And I'm going to go through them quickly with you. Additionally, in the Let's Camp It elective adventure for Weeblos is a significant outdoor ethics requirement. So next slide. So Tigers in the Wild, it was really just about hearing and learning about the outdoor code. And they have a little work thing here where it's printed. And the goal here is that they're going to turn this into a puzzle and put it back together and then all say the outdoor code. And that's the activity that goes along with it. Next slide. And in Wolf, the Paws of the Path. The actual requirement is learn about the outdoor code and the leave no trace principles for kids. And here they get there is a breakdown of all of that. They get the breakdown of the outdoor code and exactly what that means for Cub Scouts. And this is the language that we produce for the Cub Scout program. Next slide. And they get a full description of the leave no trace principles for kids. Unfortunately, the logo still needs to be updated. Can't win them all. But all of this is in their manual, and they get a chance to discuss this and learn about those valuable principles for their outdoor activities. Next slide. Now we move into the Bear program, and the Bear program goes directly into those kids' principles. So there are 7 requirements: the know before you go, choose the right path, trash and trash, where they actually have a specific requirement that deals with one of those leave no trace principles for kids. So I think that was an improvement based upon what we had in the past. So that was great. Next slide. And then we get to Weeblos. So in that required adventure, they go on an outing, a 2-mile walk, and while practicing the leave no trace principles for kids and the outdoor code. So to me, that was a bit of a disappointment. It is an opportunity to if they actually do that and they talk about it, it's a great learning opportunity, but it's something that may get overlooked. I will say though, if you step on the next slide, when we get to the Let's Camp, and this is now an elective adventure, they actually have to recite the outdoor code and the leave no trace principles for kids from memory. So that's the first time in which we're asking them to actually memorize. Now, to me, this was a loss. I would have preferred to have had this as a required adventure, but you win the battles you can win, and you move on with the other ones. It's in our interest, I think, to try to encourage every Weeblo to get that Let's Camp elective adventure, because that way they'll get an opportunity to actually learn the outdoor code and learn those principles for kids. And then lastly, one more slide. We get to the outdoor adventurer, which is a required adventure. And this is after a camp out, they're supposed to have a discussion about what went well and what they could do differently, and how they could put into practice those principles that are in the outdoor code and the leave no trace principles for kids. So this is that discussion item, and a very valuable tool. So that's outdoor ethics in the Cub Scout program. Overall, I'm encouraged. I think we've got a lot of good stuff here to work with. There's an opportunity for every Cub Scout to get their hands dirty and do something to help our planet by getting that Champions for Nature elective adventure. And we can help them with their required adventures and learning about the outdoor code and the leave no trace principles for kids. Next slide. So I did put a resource here. If you'd like to learn more about the Cub Scout program, you can go right to that QRC code. And you can look up online. There are webinars. There's all kinds of things that can tell you all about the new Cub Scout program. I just wanted to deal with our little two specific areas and share that with you tonight. And next slide is some more resources. So a link to the Cub Scout program updates presentation. This is where they actually tell you about it. And a link to the scouting.org program updates. That's just an FAQ page. And then the Scouting Magazine YouTube channel has some webinars that you can actually watch. And there's bound to be a lot more information coming out as the months go past. And then lastly, I just came back from the Boy Scouts of America's national annual meeting, and a big announcement was made. I'm sure most of you have probably saw this, but if you'll step on, the Boy Scouts of America is changing its name, and it is now going to be Scouting America. Now, really what that means is the corporate name remains the Boy Scouts of America. And remember, we are congressionally chartered under that name. So changing all that would have been monumental. But we'll be doing business as Scouting America. And that'll be taking effect on February 8th, 2025. It was the big announcement at the National Annual Meeting. I have one other thing I do want to share, is that our host tonight is not with us. She's not with us because she's still at the National Annual Meeting, but it was announced that she'll be awarded the Order of the Arrows Distinguished Service Award. And, that's an enormous recognition, and Outdoor Ethics and Conservation will send our appropriate congratulations to her. And that's all I have. Last slide, which is simply my thank you for all you do to support outdoor ethics and conservation and scouting. I am going to stay on to answer your questions. I will answer the one that I saw earlier, which was about training codes. And the question was, is there going to be a new training code for the Level 2 instructor refresher course? And no, there will not. So it'll be, it's only the one training code, that D79, and you will need to have that updated, send it to your registrar or whatever, whoever can do that update, and send a copy or certificate and ask to have it updated. Additionally, I'm always asked about the new Leave No Trace skills course. And that is the alternative now that we're using for the National Medal of Outdoor Achievement, and is a wonderful 16-hour training program all about the Leave No Trace 7 principles. I have requested, and I keep requesting, a training code for it. It will come, and I will announce it to the group as soon as I get it. But as of today, I still do not have that. So thank you all, and I will hang on if there's further discussion.
Thank you, Scott. We have a few announcements here at the end. We'll go ahead and turn some time over to Keith or Kathy, whichever one of you is here, to talk about our conference that's coming up real quick.
So I got to tell you, I'm excited as excited could be for this conference coming up in right around 4 months. We have the speaker as Julie Seaton, granddaughter of Ernest Thompson Seaton, one of the founders of Boy Scouts of America. But there is, and I just put that code into the chat. Go out to the landing page and you can see the classes. The classes are being updated daily. What kind of classes? The classes per your request have like 101, 201, and 301, if you're familiar with the way the college courses go. So there is some for, well, I guess we'll call it the newbies, and then some for more advanced people. One thing to keep in mind, this is very important, come the 1st of June, the price goes up $25. This is something national hard coded into the registration program. And so go ahead and get signed up. Take a look at, if you're coming out to Salt Lake, take a look at the pre-conference courses. And Scott, maybe you'd like to talk about the risk management courses. We have one on Tuesday. That's a hard pass. One on Tuesday, one on Wednesday. Risk management, as you know, is very important in scouting and safety. I highly recommend if you're going to be leading anything to attend these courses.
Keith, I will pipe in. So it was one of the, it is the first pillar of the roadmap for the scouting organization is a safe program. And as such, we are running these 2 sessions, one on Tuesday and one on Wednesday, to just help all of our volunteers that are interested in learning what they might do differently to make their program a safer environment for the participants in any of the courses that we run. So they're going to review the protocols of safe scouting, as well as go into some in-depth risk management that is particularly needed for our trek-based programs. So that's the goal.
Thanks, Scott. And Josh Lamont has had to bow out, which because he's got to work. The deal is, though, Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday afternoon, there will be a live Zoom session for Q&A with Josh. From what I had to miss the Texas presentation of this, but I heard that equally important to the presentations of the risk management material was the Q&A with Josh, who has a lot of experience in both military, federal programs, scouting programs, because, you know, there's always crazy questions. Now, for the people who want to take a Wednesday course, like the COEA course put on by our own Michelle and John Garnering, along with the DCSA, or the Tread Lightly Master Tread Trainer course on Wednesday for the unheard of price of $100. Woo! We have a Tuesday risk management course, only for those who are going to take a different course on Wednesday. That's important. And also on Thursday, right after lunch, there is going to be a Conservation Good Turn Award project. And the reason for this is it's going to be explained what the Conservation Good Turn project is all about, which is mainly for the very young kids to help them get their feet wet in conservation. Now, besides wise use of the resource, a lot of people, including me, are pretty undereducated in what is conservation, what can we do for conservation. And so this is a pretty important a component to the Outdoor Ethics and Conservation Conference, of course. So would like you, there's an email that comes back from your registration process, and I am going to go out and tickle people who a number of people did respond to me and said they want to be part of this. Just so you know, we have a dozen showers, half for women, half for men. So after you get a little dirty with this project, you're able to take a shower and then be ready for the opening ceremonies. You could even take a nap afterwards too, and then be ready for the opening ceremonies a little later on. Anything I've missed, Matt?
I think you covered it pretty good.
Okay,
Thank you, Keith.
there you go. Sign up now. Well, if you can.
All right. Yep. We'd love to have you come out and visit us in Utah. Yep. Just keep note that first day of June, that's when it goes up, $25. So don't miss that. All right. Here is our list of level 2 instructor courses that are happening throughout the year. You can find the schedule. The links to those are over here in the video. If you go to bsa.org, or you can find that or scouting.org on the website. You can find that there. We also have, as always, the Dan Howell Scholarship available for anyone that might need some financial help in getting to one of these level 2 instructor courses. All right. And then, as always, if you have any photos of outdoor ethics education, conservation projects, or just nature photos, please send them to Paul at, it's outdoorethics-bsa@gmail.com.
Hey, Matt, I pulled up this flyer in its big form. Just a couple things here. We do have Danielle Fowles McNiven, the Assistant Director of Tread Lightly, will speak to us. That's always interesting. The program is still we are still partners of them. And when you're traveling to your destinations, it's Tread Lightly. When your feet hit the ground, it's Leave No Trace. We need to know all about that. JD Tanner will be there, as well as Ben Abbott, who is let's see, I don't know what you really call him, beyond a professional, but he knows all about the Great Salt Lake. I don't know too many people who know about the Great Salt Lake. And thanks to Matt, I know that kayaking down that beautiful blue canal isn't as peachy as it looks. In addition to him, we will have Dave Whittakin, the forest supervisor of the Uinta Wasatch Cache National Forest, which is actually 3 national forests being managed as one, if I understand that correctly. I think that's a fairly unique situation, at least that I know of. And we will also have the traveling trainers, formerly known as the traveling trainers, the traveling teams. My bad. Formerly known as the traveling trainers. So there's a lot of cool people there. I see a number of new people have signed up, which is very, very exciting. It's always nice to meet new people. And so look forward to seeing you all there. And there's also a link on there for your apparel. Come get your apparel. Okay, I'm done, Matt.
All right, thanks. So Ben Abbott is actually a professor in the Natural Resources Department at BYU here in Utah, and he is an expert on the hydrology of the Great Salt Lake and saline lakes around the world. I misspoke earlier about that email address to send the pictures to. It's this one right here. It's roundtable@outdoorethics-bsa.org. If you wouldn't mind also taking this survey, as always, to give us some feedback and let us know what kind of topics you'd like to see in the future, that'd be fantastic. Scott, I believe you have something you want to say. I can see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I had mentioned the Order of the Isles Distinguished Service Award. Apparently, I neglected to say it's Andrea Watson, who is a professional for outdoor programs and properties, and has worked with our committee for many years. And she is the one who's been recognized with that award. And I just wanted to send our congratulations her way.
Fantastic. And I am not Andrea Watson, as I have stated earlier, even though my little name tag says it, but I am using her account for this. So congrats to Andrea. She is awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're excited to see you in the fall as we start the new program year. We've got some emails coming out in July with more information. Have a fantastic summer. Have a great time on all of your high adventures, and we will see you in the future.